It's hell on earth as Hurricane Ian slams into Florida.
The evidence of climate change is indisputable.
Scores of fires are burning out of control across Australia.
The world is already more than 1 degree hotter than it was in the 19th century, and the temperature is rising.
Catastrophic flooding in Pakistan has killed more than 1,000 people.
There are growing fears world leaders are not moving fast enough to save the planet from a climate crisis.
There's an increased frustration, really, with the political process in a sense that this was stalled.
Some are taking matters into their own hands by suing governments and fossil fuel companies for damage caused by climate change.
Lo que espero conseguir con esta demanda es que la empresa que se responsabilice por los daños medioambientales que ha causado.
Climate activists are waking up to the power of the law as a tool to drive change.
Some of these cases are David and Goliath litigation, pitting some of the poorest countries and communities against the world's most powerful companies.
All of this area here is all gone.
With the fate of the planet at stake, could taking big emitters to court help finally solve the climate crisis? Saul is a farmer and mountain guide.
Bueno, cuando estás en la montaña, pues sientes tranquilidad, silencio. Estar aquí es algo como lo más placentero que puedas encontrar donde vayas.
He lives in Huaraz, in central Peru, but says his livelihood is at risk from climate change.
Bueno, yo he crecido aquí en la parte alta, un pueblo que se llama un centro poblado, Yupa. Veías Laguna Montaña Churup, ahí el Huamasraju, todo lleno de nieve, todo glaciar. Y glaciares han ido desapareciendo, ¿no?, de frente a nosotros. Yo me siento muy preocupado.
Melting glaciers are a particular concern to the people of Huaraz, as the town sits below Lake Palcacocha, which is fed by meltwater from the glaciers above. Climate change means these glaciers are melting faster than ever, and the lake is growing as a result.
Durante los últimos 42 años ha crecido su nivel, su volumen de agua 34 veces.
There is now a very real fear an avalanche could trigger a catastrophic flood from the lake. It wouldn't be the first time this has happened. When the lake burst its banks in 1941, it's estimated up to 4,000 people were killed. If it was to happen today, it would be much worse, with up to 50,000 lives at risk.
Cuando ocurrió en el año 41 había pocos habitantes, pocas casas, y ahora la ciudad ha crecido. Me imagino pues no de que habría más daños materiales y también daños, pérdidas humanas.
Saul has been campaigning for better flood defences for years, claiming the existing siphons controlling the level of the lake aren't up to the job. But so far, no one has been willing to foot the bill. Making changes like improving flood defences to cope with the effects of climate change is known as climate adaptation. It covers everything from developing heat-resistant crops to building sea walls. But it's massively underfunded all over the world, not just in Peru.
If you want to know more about adaptation and how small investments could dramatically reduce the harm done by climate change, then check out our special report by clicking the link.
Between 2019 and 2020, just $46 billion was spent on climate adaptation, far below projections for what's needed, and much less than the $571 billion spent on mitigation, doing things like replacing fossil fuels with green energy to cut emissions. But there are hopes this could change.
One reason for which adaptation has been neglected financially, perhaps, is that originally it was seen as a poor country issue. We are now seeing annually very real and very visceral consequences of climate change. Fires in California, fires in Australia, floods, droughts in Europe. This notion that adaptation is just a poor country issue is very much fading as we see these impacts being felt increasingly and annually in the West.
For Saul, attitudes towards the need for climate adaptation aren't changing fast enough. In a bid to force the issue, he's taken another route. Saul is suing European energy giant RWE, which is located halfway around the world in Germany, to pay for better flood defences. It's a groundbreaking case.
It's really putting these principles of transnational climate justice before the courts for the first time.
Singling out one energy company on the other side of the globe might seem strange, but the case is based upon advances in climate science that allow researchers to estimate how much carbon individual companies have emitted since the Industrial Revolution began.
That creates a sort of possibility of accountability that is being tested in the courts and that I think we will probably be seeing a lot more of.
This research, known as the Carbon Majors Study, suggests that German energy giant RWE is responsible for 0.47% of global emissions up to 2010. Based on this calculation, Saul, with the support of a German NGO, is asking RWE to pay 0.47% of the cost of shoring up the lake.
Entonces, los países que menos han contribuido al cambio climático están pagando ya las consecuencias desde ya mucho tiempo.
0.47% of the cost of the repairs would be €17,000. Peanuts to a major energy firm like RWE, whose annual revenue in 2021 was €24.8 billion. But this case is about much more than funds. It's about setting a precedent.
A win in and of itself would be huge, and from speaking to the lawyers involved, Saul's lawyers, it also wouldn't just be a one-off. It's very clear that they would see a win as just the first step in a whole suite of suits against carbon majors.
It's complicated though. RWE points out its emissions were and are legal. And in today's society, few people can claim they don't contribute to global warming.
I went to Peru to meet Saul, and I took a plane to do this. I emitted carbon dioxide. The whole complexity of climate change is that our individual emissions are all contributing to this problem, and they are all causing damages to people all around the world.
RWE told The Economist, "It has never been the position of RWE in this case that climate change does not exist. This case is about whether or not Mr. Yuya's very specific allegations, whereby RWE, through its historic emissions, is responsible for 0.47% of the alleged risk for his house, can be proven by the claimant. And as to why RWE does not pay Mr. Luciano Yuya the estimated €17,000, we are not liable, and the claim does not comply with German civil law." Saul's case is just part of a deluge of climate litigation around the world. In the past 10 years, the number of climate-related cases has almost tripled, from 83 in 2011 to 227 in 2021. The vast majority of these have been in America. Here, most of the cases against fossil fuel companies deal with adaptation. For example, several coastal cities, including Oakland and San Francisco, are suing for billions of dollars worth of flood defences they say they need to cope with climate change. Many of these cases are stuck bouncing between federal and state courts, with lawyers arguing about where and how they should be decided, or if they even belong in court at all.
Corporate lawyers have argued that if you make it harder and more expensive to exploit a certain resource, the end result might be just to push that towards a less regulated country or company. And also, if you pursue this avenue of seeking climate action through the courts, you end up with a sort of piecemeal solution to climate change.
While there may be legal gridlock in America, climate lawyers have recently enjoyed an unusual win on the other side of the world. in the Torres Strait Islands. This archipelago off the northmost tip of Australia has been home to Torres Strait Islander peoples for millennia.
My name is Mosby. I'm 6th generation native bloodline from the tribe of Kulkalgal, Masig Island, Central Torres Strait.
But here, as in Peru, climate change threatens the islanders' future. Every year, approximately 1 metre of land is eroded. In March 2019, a cyclone resulted in the loss of 3 metres of shoreline.
It's scary because even now as we speak, I think we have to move a bit back because it's all the ground is getting washed away as we speak.
Rising sea levels mean the islands are disappearing before their eyes, as storms and erosion destroy homes, livelihoods, and even burial sites.
All of her remains was all laying everywhere. The kids thought they were picking up a shell when they dug her up. That was the old lady head, skull. My grandparents used to have their gardens. They used to plant sweet potatoes, cassavas, sugar cane. You can't plant anything now.
The islanders refused to sit and watch their homes being destroyed. So they made a historic complaint to the UN, accusing Australia of violating their human rights because it had failed to cut emissions or fund coastal defences. And they won. In September 2022, Australia was ordered to pay them compensation and do whatever was needed to protect their way of life.
I was shocked at first. I had tears of joy, and I just gave a big scream out in the middle of the village. We won our case.
The committee was really clear that climate change is a human rights problem and that states must protect people from climate change.
It's the beginning. And all the other low-lying islands throughout the Pacific and around the world who was suffering from climate change, it'll open the doors for them as well.
It's not just Indigenous people, it's anyone who's living in a vulnerable location. All states need to look at their adaptation policies and plans because they may have to compensate people.
Australia has 6 months to respond with an action plan. The government seems sympathetic, so the Torres Strait Islanders are hopeful for meaningful investment. But as the ruling was issued by the UN Human Rights Committee, not a national court, it's not legally binding.
I don't think the courts are just about winning and losing. I think it's about the big picture of the arguments that are being made. The courts could exert pressure on governments, they could exert pressures on companies to address the things that they haven't been doing fast enough.
In Peru, Saul is still waiting for the flood defences. A huge milestone in this case came in May 2022, when the German court, including the case judge, visited Juarez to assess the damage to the lake.
Es un gran avance, pero cuando tú estás aquí en las montañas, la desglaciación sigue. Como que por un lado hemos avanzado, pero por otro lado la situación no mejora, no cambia.
With the case set to play out in court for years, Saul's hope is his fight will move the needle on the climate change debate before it's too late.
I'm Catherine Brahic and I'm the Environment Editor for The Economist. If you're interested in learning more about climate litigation, please click on the link. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe.